Welcome to a special inside track on Donald Trump. People have been asking me about what's happened. Shootings, assassination attempts, it's dark stuff. Let's take a look at Mr. Trump's natal horoscope to begin with. The Sun and the North Node, and pretty close to them Uranus, are right at the top of the chart in the Northern Hemisphere, and the 10th house is very much to do with where we connect to the world at large. So there is a fated dimension for sure with the North Node on the Sun. In the quick-witted sign of Gemini, a communicator. But when Mr. Trump was born, the moon was in the opposite sign of Sagittarius. So he was born on a full moon. That does make it more difficult to integrate the emotional energies of the moon. And of course, the moon in Sagittarius in itself is very free-spirited. So we have a mutable energy with that gathering of players at the top of the chart, but also with the South Node on the moon at the bottom of the chart. So that's the part of his situation where he likes to be free around his home and family life. Now the ascendant is at 29 degrees 57 on the anaretic point in Leo. Leo is a very grand sign, of course, and Mars, the planet of desire and passion, but also assertion, which does gain from a lot of extra elevation in terms of self-confidence, is also very close to that ascendant in the sign of Leo, but it is tucked up in the 12th house. But the critical thing is both, but particularly the ascendant, very close to the fixed star Regulus, regal. So this is a person who feels comfortable in the limelight and seeks it out at every opportunity. So that gives us a little bit of a flavour when it comes to his relating style. He does have Venus in the sign of Cancer, which means that his language can dip into the emotional sphere, but it's very close to Saturn. So that's where that more acerbic energy can come from. But they are in the 11th house, and that can be a connection to a wider audience. So that just gives you a bit of a brief flavour of his natal chart. Now let's just look at his secondary progress chart. Now, from the day we're born, if we take the ephemeris and we count forwards the number of years we've been on the planet and see that as a day for a year, that advances his sun forwards to 7 degrees and 40 minutes in Virgo. But the critical thing is the ascendant, which also moves forwards, is at 1 degree and 39 in the sign of Scorpio. Now that's very passionate, it's very intense. And he also has the moon, recently has moved across that ascendant. The moon in progressions moves at 1 degree every 4 weeks. But you can see from the chart, from the secondary chart, that Pluto, the planet of power, is right up there at the top of the chart on the 10th house cusp. So that's really demanding in Leo on that 10th house cusp. Extra attention. But the critical thing, I think, is that ascendant in Scorpio, and that's because it is squaring up to the moving Pluto in Aquarius in the sky, and that could provide some challenges, because if we think about it, the first house is very much to do with our body, it's to do with the way we connect to the wider world, but Pluto can be the planet of massive changes, and also it can be about life and death. So that's really interesting. But let's take a look at where the planets were when the shooting occurred, which from what I can see was about 11 minutes past 6 p.m. local time in Butler in Pennsylvania. And you can see that Mars and Uranus in that conjunction are right at the top of Mr. Trump's natal chart in the 10th house, where he has that Sun, North Node and Uranus position. But Mars in the 10th house can be extremely assertive, but in terms of his natal chart, they're forging an exact square with his Mars. Mars in the 12th house is very much about secret enemies. If we think about traditional astrology, the 12th house is where we're not sure of who is against us, but it can create in subjects a sense that people are against them, and of course that's one of Mr. Trump's ways of rallying support, is that there is this opposition unseen. So we've got the energy of Mars in his natal chart, very close to his ascendant, and they're both squaring back to that electric, explosive, tension building, angry combination between Mars, the planet of violence, and Uranus, the planet of fast moving, quick, but outspoken. Remember, he's got a very outspoken Uranus in his natal chart in the 10th house. So when this event exactly occurred, the moving Pluto in the sky is exactly square his progressed ascendant, his body, and Pluto can be the planet of life and death, but critically Mars, the planet of drama, of sudden actions, and Uranus, very much about higher truths, right at the top of his chart. So in the most physical, visible connection to the wider world, are squaring up his Mars in the part of his situation very much to do with secret enemies. And then we have a violent action. Now, obviously, this is a very serious event, and I just hope that this astrology, this brief astrology reading, gives you a little bit of an overview. So in terms of the move in Uranus, that's going to stay in Donald Trump's 10th house, that very visible location, for an extremely long time, about another 8.5, 9 years. Mars, of course, is going to move on the 20th into the sign of Gemini, and that probably is going to give him more momentum from a political viewpoint. But in terms of his own personal situation, this event that occurred yesterday, you can see in the horoscope. Also, of course, the combination between Mars and Uranus was conjunct the fixed star Algol, which has got a fearsome reputation for bad stuff. So it all coincided on that particular event, but in terms of his progress chart, I still feel that Pluto is quite the challenge to Mr. Trump ongoing. Thank you so much for joining me. All the best, and bye.